Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 14, Episode 65. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Wednesday, Steelers Nation, as we march forwards towards the Pittsburgh Steelers Week 16 game against the Cincinnati Bengals. That'll take place on Saturday, a big game for the Bengals and maybe for the Steelers as well, as they are 7-7. Dave, how you doing?
It's been an eventful start to the week here that we got a lot to talk about. And obviously with the injury report, we'll go over here in a little bit, and some things that George Pickens said on Tuesday. And I think we got coordinator corner coming up, if you will. Boy, you ruined all that, didn't you? Remember?
I know. The good old days.
Yeah, that was the sit downs that they would have with the coordinators and all like that. And but it's shaping
one
up
Tyler Tyler Eifert later.
Yeah, and Keith Butler rocking chair. I was just thinking about that a little bit, squeaky chair and all like that. But how things have changed with the Pittsburgh Steelers, right?
As the George Pickens turns. And so we'll talk about his comments again, more things to discuss a little bit later in the show, though, Dave. Some housekeeping. Pittsburgh, a couple of safety-related moves occurring on Tuesday. The team signing Jalen Elliott to the practice squad. He's been on and off the team dating back to training camp with the injuries to Minkah Fitzpatrick, with DeMonte Casey suspension, Trenton Thompson injured, etc., bolstering some safety depth. Also, Elijah Riley returning to practice after still on IR, but designated to return. The 21-day window is officially open for him. He was limited on Tuesday with an ankle injury, but he's going to try to work his way back and maybe come back at some point this season.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if Riley goes full today. If he does, there's probably a good chance that he gets activated on Friday and then dresses for the game and probably helps out on special teams, because they're probably going to have to shift some roles around or whatnot to cover the special teams aspect. I wouldn't expect Riley to play a lot on the defensive side of football, but you might see him on special teams. But I think regardless, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him on the practice report on Wednesday there. And really, it's going to be interesting to watch the whole minutia of the Friday transactions, because Mike Tomlin talked about Miles Jack and Eric Rowe. Are those guys just going to be flat out elevations? Will any of them need to go to the 53? We'll find out how serious, once again, the Minkah Fitzpatrick injury is, because if they think he's going to miss several games in a row, then they might place him on IR. And it's really hard to say how serious that injury is. I think Jerry Dulac had something out there on Twitter that, obviously it's significant enough that Minkah's not playing this week, but how much beyond that is there? So not expecting Minkah to go to IR, but obviously they won't have him this week. And once again, and also we got by probably 4:00 today, we should know the outcome of Casey, right?
Maybe. I don't know exactly what time in terms of the potential appeal. I don't know if that has to be announced by 4 or if it's going to leak out later, but sometime today would be my guess on knowing DeMonte Casey's status of appeal.
But even so, we wouldn't expect him to. Well, here's one thing I guess that they could do if he's actually suspended, right? He would go on the reserve suspended list. So that would open up a roster spot there for maybe potentially somebody like Riley along those lines. So True. it's gonna be an eventful, rest of the week leading on into game day.
The most notable name back at practice on Tuesday, with apologies to Elijah Riley, was not him. It was one Kenny Pickett. He was back on a limited basis practicing. We saw some clips of him in individual work, reportedly per ESPN's Brooke Pryor, the fourth quarterback through after Mason Rudolph, Mitch Trubisky, and practice squatter Trace McSorley. And so maybe a light day for Kenny Pickett, but a return to practice nonetheless. And so we'll see what his participation is for Wednesday, Thursday. Still am pretty confident Mason Rudolph will start, but Pickett practicing, of course, is very notable.
If he winds, he's got to be able to protect himself. He's got to be able to run on that ankle, right? He's got to be able to move around and all like that. And it does seem a little quick, and I don't know how much kind of gamemanship is involved on Mike Tomlin's part, at least maybe having the Bengals think that there's a potential that they could see Kenny Pickett in this game. Maybe that's involved here. So you would probably want him to go, full today? If he's going to play?
He's got to get at least 1 day of full work. So at least by Thursday, I mean, he would have to probably continually ramp up. Even if today was not technically full, he'd have to do something more and more to get full by Thursday.
And, they threw Mason Rudolph out there for a media session on Tuesday there. And he sounds like he's going to be the guy to go. It would be very, you put this out on Twitter yesterday, it'd be a very Mason Rudolph thing if for some reason he was to get the late bump here in favor of Kenny Pickett, wouldn't it?
It would, but I'm thinking that Rudolph will start and Kenny Pickett will return for week 17 at Seattle. That's my read of the situation right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think it's at least safe to say that your starting quarterback this week would be one of Mason Rudolph or Kenny Pickett.
Steelers Tuesday injury report to go through it name by name. 9 players on the list, 4 not practicing. That's Trenton Thompson with the neck stinger injury he suffered in that Colts game. Minka Fitzpatrick, of course, with the knee, as you said, already ruled out. Najee Harris with the knee. Isaac Seumalo with the shoulder. Those guys have been battling those injuries for the past several weeks. 5 players limited. Kenny Pickett, Elijah Riley, we mentioned those 2 names. Cam Hayward, limited as he goes through concussion protocol. Broderick Jones with an ankle, and Pat Freiermuth with a knee. Those are 2 new names, 2 new injuries. We'll assume they're minor now, but we'll watch the Wednesday and Thursday injury reports and practice reports and game statuses and all those types of things. So names to really watch for right now. I assume Harris, Seumalo is going to go. Again, we'll watch Pickett. We'll see what Trenton Thompson does or does not do, especially given the precarious depth of the safety position right now.
Yeah, then Cameron Hayward coming through the protocol. Right. You never know how that's going to go. The hope obviously being that he goes full today, and then full again, obviously on Thursday. Or let's see, what's today?
Yeah, to be Thursday.
On Thursday, and then maybe Thursday night get that announcement that he's out of protocol, or maybe even as early as tonight. So obviously keeping your fingers crossed there, but it's hard to predict concussion protocol.
It is. Being limited on that first practice back is usually a good sign. That's what TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith were last week. And so typically you have to go a full day of practice and then probably do some more testing that night to get cleared, which is what happened, as you mentioned, to Watt and Highsmith. So he's probably on a good track, but you never know for sure. There can be setbacks. So that's obviously important to watch.
Right.
All right. Where to from here?
What about the Bengals side of things?
Yeah, the big name there's Jamar Chase and his shoulder injury. Been some mixed reports. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? Zach Taylor, the Bengals head coach, not ruling him out, but the reporting is strongly indicating that Chase is not going to play this week with the AC joint injury that he suffered in that overtime win against the Vikings this past Saturday. So he did not practice yesterday. That's kind of the one big name to watch overall is Jamar Chase. So I believe that Alex Kappa, one of the linemen, limited, but I think really Chase is kind of the one name. Of course, they did lose DJ Reader for the season with a quad injury in that game. So he's on IR. So there's a practice report, but missing him is one of their big interior pluggers alongside BJ Hill.
They also lost a key special teamer, a gunner, didn't they?
Yeah, DJ Ivey. He was covering a punt, and I think he tore up his knee or something. So they had some big losses in that win over the Vikings.
Sure did.
All right, Dave, let's just dive right into it here. George Pickens speaking with the media on Tuesday, and I think two notable comments. Probably the most notable thing that he said was asked about the lack of effort on the one block that he had that I'm sure people have seen, where he initially blocked the corner and then backed off, kind of threw an arm at him, let him go, and the corner helped make the tackle on Jalen Warren short of the goal line. Pickens asked about that and essentially boiled it down to two thoughts of this is media criticism. These guys don't play in the NFL. I pay them no mind. And then also said he did not want to get hurt on the play, did not want to get rolled up on, citing what happened to Texans wide receiver Tank Dell a couple of weeks ago. As you pointed out, those two plays are not similar, but your overall interpretation of the Pickens comments about his lack of effort blocking.
Why didn't you just put the bunny back in the box?
I don't know what that means. That's how you tweeted last night.
That's a Con Air reference of when they're down in the belly of the plane and he told them to put the bunny in the box, and then he ended up having to take care of him, the fellow inmate that's down there. And at the end, he says, "Why didn't you just put the bunny back in the box?" And that's kind of my. It's a dated thought, but it's kind of what rolled through my head. And long story short, it's just like, why didn't you just take another angle here? You had the perfect opportunity of just coming out and saying, look, I got to be, just give the cliche, and I know a lot of times we even talk about over the years on this show, it's nice to have players not go the cliche route and give some honest answers of how they feel, how they're feeling. But he didn't handle that very well at all, and look, you take I got a prediction for you. He's not going to win the Chief Award with the media, the local Pittsburgh chapter of the Pro Football Writers Association. He's not going to probably win that award for his dealings with the media.
He should, though. He's given them the best quotes, the best material that a reporter could dream of.
Yeah. Nah. He had been better off of him just saying, look, I got to be better, trying to put that behind me as fast as I can, yada, yada, and go that route. To me, kind of just doubled down. And look, you rewatch that. And for him to even throw out the Tank Dell injury, and if you go back and obviously, and we've posted clips of that Tank Dell injury a couple of weeks ago there, Tank Dell's not George Pickens' size. Let's throw that out there first and foremost. Tank Dell's a smaller player. He's going in. He's inserting himself in the middle of a goal line play with a lot of big bodies flying around there, and then gets caught up that way. And it was an unfortunate injury for Tank Dell, but after the fact, you got to tip your hat to him for giving the effort on the play, because if he takes that play off, he does not get injured, right? In that situation. The George Pickens play is obviously way out on the edge. Now, look, I understand the end result of that was George Pickens having to dive over bodies or leap over bodies, but it doesn't even probably get to that if he puts that defensive back in the second row, and it's not like we haven't seen George Pickens put people on their ass before, right? He has given one of the things that stuck out not only at Georgia, but in his first, in his limited time in the NFL, is his ability to manhandle some guys, and even close to the line of scrimmage on some of these cracks or chips, sitting people down and giving effort. So it's not like he doesn't have it in him. He just made a decision on that play. He wasn't going to block, and I don't think, I can't imagine real time in his head he's thinking, I don't want to be a Tank Dell here. I think he just manufactured that as an excuse afterwards, kind of doubling down and kind of, how dare you members of the media and bloggers and Alex and Dave sitting in their mom's basement, how dare you criticize me because you've never played the game. Well, I got news for him. there are several former NFL players who have played the game that are taking issue with what they saw. So throw out the media, throw out you and me, throw out, everybody who hasn't played the game. The people that have are taking issue with it, and that's enough right there. And just, I think he could have gone a better route here, obviously, Alex.
I think largely speaking, anytime a player pulls the "you've never played in the NFL" card, it's typically a losing hand that you're trying to convince somebody with. Listen, this was a must-win game. You had to do whatever it takes to win this game. And anytime you step out on that field, you're risking injury. So I understand his point. You get rolled up on, you're blocking. We've seen linemen get hurt that way. But man, you're on the goal line in a must-win game where things have been crappy the last couple of weeks. You got to do everything possible to help your team win, not just him, but the entire group. And that's the effort that you show. It's not time to worry about, I got to protect myself and I don't want to get maybe rolled up on in kind of some freak circumstance. Yeah, that's possible. That can happen. But, you got a job to do to help this team win. And, when this team is struggling so much, we talked about, you got to bring your effort. It has to be even better than it's been before, to do the little things, be detail oriented and try to overcome the injuries and the poor play and the struggles. That's how you turn this thing around, is by, doing the little things well and being detail oriented and, putting your hand in the pile. And that applies to the entire team, not just him. So the answer, I don't think, flies with any Steelers fan who heard that response by George Pickens.
I wonder how that flies in his own locker room.
Not well, I'm sure.
We'll never know. And, I think in today's NFL, there's more of everybody just takes care of their own business, doesn't want to get too deeply involved in someone else's business, because of the 24-hour media cycle and all like that. But, man, if I'm a teammate of his, I'm grimacing, I'll tell you that.
Think about, he's blocking for Jaylen Warren, and how all out is Jaylen Warren. I mean, he will block to the ends of the earth for anybody on any situation. So you think about just the mentality difference between those two guys.
Yeah, I really wonder how that's perceived, and I really wonder if someone will or can kind of take him aside, and even if it matters. Here's the thing, and I've said this time and time. Go ahead and hit the rest of what George Pickens had to say.
Yeah, the other notable thing we wrote about from his comments, his brief media scrum, was, I believe Mike Pursuta asked him about the meeting that he and Mike Tomlin apparently had. Mike Tomlin telling Bob Labriola that post-Patriots game that he and Pickens sat down, watched some tape, had a really good heart-to-heart, good educational meeting about how to handle frustration, importance of keeping your head in the game might be needed late, all that kind of stuff. Pursuta asked Pickens about that, and Pickens seemed to deny that meeting ever took place. And I believe a PR person after the fact said there was miscommunication about, Pickens was confused about the timing of it. We're going to go down this whole rabbit hole, but that was even kind of in dispute and in question, that meeting that he and Tomlin apparently had.
Yeah, and I want to give him kind of the benefit of the doubt because he asked about, did he have the dates confused? And in other words, did he not fully understand either the question or the time frame of the question? But even if he wasn't clear on, maybe if there was confusion about the time frame, he could have just said, "Yeah, I talked to Tomlin."
Mm-hmm.
In other words, give them what they want, which is they want to know about the talk with Tomlin. Did that happen or did that not happen, regardless of the time frame? I want to kind of give him the benefit of the doubt of not of wondering about if he was asked about a certain time frame and maybe confused that time frame, because he referenced, well, didn't he say something to the line, well, we just played the Colts or something like that? Could that a meeting happen before? You see where I'm going with that? But even so, I'm trying to give him at least some benefit of the doubt there, but it's hard to do.
Right. And we just wrote about it, not to try to get into a big semantic thing about when the meeting occurred, but when you have a coach like Mike Tomlin talking about the meeting that they had and the importance and the value that he got out of it. And it was a pretty big story kind of heading into the Colts game of saying, okay, Pickens, responding, and we'll see how it looks. And then Pickens denying it. that becomes a story. So it's a story just for the coach says this thing happened, Pickens says it does not happen. What's going on here? I mean, some people may think it's silly to talk about, did it happen on a Monday or Friday or whatever, the last week, 2 weeks ago, but we just wrote about it because it was an important story initially. And so it was important to follow up on Pickens' comment about it.
And Tomlin gives those weekly sit downs with Bob Labriola, and you would, and it's probably dangerous to do, you would at least assume that happens either the day of the Mike Tomlin weekly press conference, or soon thereafter, along with the sit down with Bob Pompiani, right? Just deductive reasoning would lead you to believe that Mike Tomlin probably likes to knock all those out at one time. Now, obviously, the Labriola interview isn't published on Steelers.com until the game day morning, and then they play the audio of that during the pregame radio show and all. So it's not like we're talking about Mike Tomlin talking about something, at least you wouldn't think, 3 weeks ago, or maybe, at least that's not the way I took it, the way the line of questioning with Tomlin was.
Well, we know what happened post-Patriots game,
right.
the interview with Labriola where Tomlin referenced the meeting. So it probably either happened the Friday, Saturday, Sunday after the Patriots game. And then, again, we can go into this whole big thing about, is it last week,
right.
2 weeks ago? But I just want to point out that, Tomlin said this meeting happened, and Pickens did not seem to respond, and did not seem to know what was being referenced when he was asked about that in his interview.
How do you think Mike Tomlin's viewing all this right now on this Wednesday morning?
I mean, I think he's got a lot on his plate. I don't know if this is the most top of mind thing for him right now is George Pickens' comments to the media. I think he's trying to get ready for this Bengals game because they got to, if there's any chance for them to get in the playoffs, they have to essentially win out. And so this game, the next two will become the most important also of the season. But I think just when you look at the culture of the team and the way that they're struggling and needing guys to really put their hand in the pile and lean in as opposed to leaning out, those comments don't sit well with achieving and accomplishing that mission.
Do you think Mike Tomlin still views this as a pebble in the shoe situation?
It's getting to be a larger pebble at the least.
And all right, now coming out of that, you see a lot of people saying, just go ahead and dump him or sit him down or make him inactive and do something immediately this week with George Pickens. And I'm here to tell you that while I understand a lot of people thinking or wanting either him, bench for the first two series or bench for the first quarter or yada, yada, or make him inactive, I can tell you right now, inactive is really kind of out of the question, right? Because if you only have five wide receivers on this 53-man roster, and one of those five is Miles Boykin, who, even though he's playing some offensive snaps, he's more special teamer than he is wide receiver. Long story short, if you decided to make Pickens inactive, you would either have to promote a wide receiver from the practice squad, or elevate somebody from the practice squad, or do some sort of minutia that ends up obviously putting maybe a guy like Anthony McFarland in the helmet to use in some passing situations, but then you're not getting any special teams value probably with Anthony. And then we go back and roll back to what's going to happen with other elevations. Are Miles Jack and Eric Rowe going to be straight elevations? If so, well, those are your two elevations, right? So that prevents you from elevating a wide receiver. And just from the personnel competitiveness standpoint, and the fact that this team's still technically in the playoff race here, it to me, the notion that George Pickens will be inactive on Saturday is just, I don't see how that can happen.
Yeah, there's no evidence that I've seen that's going to indicate Mike Tomlin is going to sit George Pickens for this game.
And even now, might you not roll him out, or might not introduce him with the starters, and maybe the first play from scrimmage, George Pickens is not out there. I could foresee something like that happening. But do you even go as far as sitting him a series or 2 series? Once again, I don't see how you can do that. You can, but I don't see that. I don't see the usefulness of that really.
I guess there's just a broader conversation to be had about how to get the message across to this guy because it feels like you've done a lot of things. You've had players talk to him. I presume that meeting with Tomlin occurred at some point, regardless of when it was. I'm sure there's been a lot of conversations just with Pickens overall, and it's just kind of not clicking. So how do you get that message across? How do you get him to really buy in and handle that frustration well? Is the $1,000,000 question.
Yeah, it is. And now obviously on the back end of this, and what's his future like right now is moving forward. Obviously it's going to be, a lot could be tied to what happens in these final 3 games and how he acts. I mean, look, he could go out and, my hope for him is he goes out and has 9 catches, 130 yards, and 2 touchdowns because nothing like, and the Steelers win because, that will help tamp a lot of this down. But but I mean, let's face it here. There's a lot of uncertainty with this team heading into this game, especially with a guy like potential with Mason Rudolph making his first. There are no guarantees that anything will be any better on the offensive side of the ball. He could just as easily, George Pickens, come out of this game with 3 catches for 38 yards, and still and be just as upset as he's been in these previous weeks here. The only thing that seems like that might help anything here is a strong George Pickens production game.
Sure, winning cures all. And if the team was winning and not on this miserable 3-game losing skid, these stories are not nearly the stories that they are if they are stories at all. I mean, they probably swept under the rug and not really talked about, not focused on much. So there's certainly an element whenever you're losing, everything gets magnified. These things become more talking points than they would be had you been winning, but they're still important. I mean, effort and doing the little things and being a team player are all, integral to a culture and how you win. And if you do those things, then you're going to be more likely to win.
And I think before we get too much deeper into maybe what might happen, after this season, look, he's not going anywhere right now in these final 3 games. How do you go about trying to correct this problem? I've got my thoughts on it, but how do you go about correcting this problem? And can it be corrected? Is the big question.
Well, sure. The latter point, can it be corrected, comes down to George Pickens. And can he take the coaching and receive the help and the advice and the insight? Some guys can, some guys can't. I don't know if he can or if he can't. Beyond that, I mean, I don't have a great answer in terms of how to kind of, help the guy. Some of it's going to be just about him growing up and maturing. Again, he's 22. He's not 30 years old. He's in his 2nd NFL year. It's been a tough year. Maybe some just time away to get away from the media and just the heat of the season will help some. I'm not sure. I don't have a good answer to how to fix this problem.
And my thoughts on it are kind of similar. Look, a person's got to want to change. And look, I have been, I am certainly throughout my life not been an angel. And there were decisions in my life where people wanted me to change things and prayed that I would change things and begged and pleaded that I would change ways. But ultimately, it had to be my decision to want to change. And I think it's the same way. I think it's the same when you talk to George Pickens. He's going to have to understand that. Look, I have said this several times. Everybody understands his frustration, but how you deal with that frustration, the best way, in especially when you're talking about a skill position and a wide receiver and all like that, a best way to deal with that frustration is just go out and do your job the best that you can. Run every route hard. Catch every ball that comes in your vicinity, because they're control the things that you can control, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that, regardless of what's happening with the team, because you cannot control how many times you're getting thrown the football in the game. You cannot control how other teams are covering you. But what you can control is how you play on every down. And if you go out of your way to give 100% on every snap, regardless of what happens, even if you get one catch for 10 yards, that stuff, the tape will speak for itself, and then everything else will take care of itself after that. You'll get paid at some point because teams will be able to see through he just wasn't getting the football, or he was he had all this bracket coverage that he was dealing with, and that caused him not to get your tape, and your effort alone will speak the loudest when you're blocking out on the edge and all like that. That's the thing that will take care of everything. And that's what he's got to understand, is that he can only control what he can control. And what he can control is his actions on every play. And then past that, I think he's got just to do a better job of having more awareness when talking to the media.
Sure. I mean, I want to give him, I try to be as graceful as I can, especially for guys that I don't know. He does not seem like a bad guy. He's not getting himself into trouble off the field and, doing AB type stuff in terms of taking shots at the organization. He's getting 22, a young guy that, we were all 22 and did some dumb things. And you look back and you see how you grow up. And so hopefully that can be Pickens' story. And he's a really talented guy, and, the potential's there. And as you said, there's valid frustration for him in this offense, how he's being used or the lack thereof, and just the struggles of the season, and wanting to be part of this team winning and making plays to help this team get on the right track. So I don't want to say all hope is lost on the guy. This is who he is, and who he will always be. But again, I just go back to your team is struggling, your season's crumbling before you. You have to do everything possible to put your hand in the pile and turn this thing around and get one victory and start from there. And that's going to require blocking, finishing your stock block on the corner, not just, hitting them off the line and then kind of watching them go. It's going to require running your routes as hard as possible every single time. It's going to require, throwing that downfield block when the receiver or the running back breaks into the second, third level, and picking up the safety to help spring that run even further. And again, that applies to the entire team. Everyone's going to have to do 110% effort to try to overcome all the issues that plague this team. And so that's why the effort becomes, if not even more important now, because your team is just struggling to find ways to win. And to overcome that, you have to kind of create your own luck and create your own productivity by doing things above and beyond.
I wonder where the concern meter is upstairs right now.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Mike Tomlin publicly has not seemed to show a ton of concern about it. But, obviously what he's doing and saying publicly and thinking privately can be two different things.
Do you think there's a chance that he's not a Steeler in 2024?
Yeah, I don't, talking absolutes is dangerous. And you have the post that went up late last night that's on the top of the page of the site right now about maybe not gifting that George Pickens jersey for Christmas. I still believe he will be a Steeler, but is there a chance that he could be moved? Yeah, I'm open to that possibility.
I just from the sheer fact of how hard it would be to tear down this, because this wide receiver room, as we've talked already a couple of times, is already going to get torn down just through yearly attrition and players' contracts and all like that. I mean, Allen Robinson, unless something drastic happens there, probably not going to be back. Miles Boykins, an unrestricted free agent. Will his special teams ability be strong enough to warrant him a return? In 2024, you already are not utilizing a guy like Calvin Austin enough, who is still probably going to be part of this team. You have Deontay Johnson under contract next year, and you have George Pickens under contract next year. So with just regular attrition in that room on the bottom end of the depth chart, it makes it very challenging to add one more in it by jettisoning away a guy like George Pickens. So they would have to be really, really upset and think that he's not going to change his stripes to get to a point where he's dealt away. And if you were going to do anything, you would probably do it at the start, before the draft or during the draft, if you're going to do anything with him, right?
Sure, that would make the most amount of sense.
All right. So I never dreamed that I would be theorizing the possibility of such a thing. With Pickens potentially not being part of this team in 2024. In my heart of hearts, I don't believe anything will happen, but I think you have to at least acknowledge the fact that something could happen.
I just say that because I think you have to take a hard look at your entire roster this offseason
Right.
and go down through the list name by name, who this guy is. Does he help you? Does he hurt you? And especially when you're talking about the bigger cultural issues and Steeler way type stuff, these things become more into focus. So I just say that kind of from a broader perspective of, I've said before, I think everything is on the table. Everything has to be examined, and that includes George Pickens' status and future with the team.
Now, I said this a couple of weeks ago on the podcast and took hell from it that I wasn't a believer that he would see a second contract with this team. I'm still
guessing your opinion is the same.
Yeah, my opinion is still the same on that. As we said here, here's the thing too. He's qualified now in his first two seasons because of the snaps that he's played for at least a level 1 proven performance escalator raise for the 2025 season, and he's on track to have a level 2 proven performance escalator raise for the 2025 season on top of that. Now, long viewpoint of that, it really doesn't matter. It's insignificant, because if he does stay with the Steelers through the 2024 season and, at least produces, what he's done an average of the first 2 years, he's going to want to get paid after the 2024 season.
Likely. I mean, that's all, who knows what things look like by then, but that would make sense.
And what would that, I mean, we're talking more than a year out. What will that 2025 offseason look like? You could visualize some quote unquote hold in type situations. And what if the Steelers balk at whatever number he has in his head,
Yeah, possible. But those things feel
Right.
like an eternity away.
Right. But I mean, I feel comfortable in doubling down right now and thinking that, man, I really don't think he's going to see a second contract with the Steelers unless some things change.
You just hope this guy can grow up a little bit, which is possible. Again, he's a really young guy, second year in the NFL, and this offense can find its footing in the passing game. Then these things maybe become less of an issue, less of a talking point. But I don't know. I don't know how the team can best get through to the guy. It feels like they've done a lot of things that they can do. And again, as you said, it kind of comes down to George Pickens himself.
Look, in the short term, you just hope that he goes out and has a good game against the Bengals.
For sure.
Because we got to stop having reasons to talk about him in this light. We need to be talking about him. Man, can you believe that catch? Can you believe that block? Man, can you? What a game! 8 catches, 135 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's what we wanted to see out of George Pickens. And once again, he doesn't have all control of that. But what we do want to see is the things that he can control on a play-by-play basis, and we'll leave it at that.
Yep, exactly. All right, Dave, also speaking to the media, Mason Rudolph, the quarterback, speaking this week. Nothing radical from him, but just focused on the here and now. Somebody did ask, and I think you mentioned this, the possibility of him basically auditioning for the rest of the NFL, being a free agent after the season, but he said his focus is solely on winning this game. Did kind of have a different answer in terms of what Mitch Trubisky said about, Trubisky said he's going to be aggressive with the football, push the ball downfield, and Rudolph said, I'm not going to huck it deep on the first play of the game. So we'll jot that down in our notes about what to expect on the opener series against the Bengals on Saturday. But, Rudolph, that's why you go to Rudolph, because he's going to be smarter with the football. He's going to take the check down. He can still air it out deep. He's got a good arm, a live arm. He's accurate, but he's going to be more, just judicious about when to take that shot.
Yeah, I do wonder, though, how tempered he's going to be in the middle of the field stuff now based on some of those comments. And look, you don't want to be reckless in it, but you go back to even the last meeting against the Bengals, right? 2 middle of the field shots early to Pat Freiermuth. Is this going to be? Is the directive going to be the flow chart of press coverage on the outside, single high, you can take your shot. If not there, everything's short. Everything calculated and short.
I just see him as somebody who's going to run your offense when you're in that situation. Trubisky was on third down before the Boswell non-attempt field goal, Harvin punt, where Tomlin wanted him to check it down. Rudolph is going to check it down on that play. On the, fourth down against the Patriots, where Trubisky took the deep shot instead of hitting Robinson short, Rudolph's going to hit Robinson short. He's going to hit Deontay in the flat instead of Pickens on the slant on the third down before. He's going to run the structure of your offense where the primary read, if it's open, he's going to hit it. And that's how I kind of differentiate between Trubisky and Mason Rudolph.
But we both agree they need explosive plays in this game. And we both agree that those are unlikely to happen, throw short, run long.
Sure. I mean, again, Rudolph's going to take some shots in this game. I don't have any doubt about that. But he's going to just do it in the right moments to attempt it, not on 3rd and 14 when you're on field goal edge range and you're just trying to get a couple of yards to make it a more manageable field goal for Chris Boswell, not on 4th and 2 when your game and the season in some respects is on the line. So it's just being smarter. It's being aware of the situation and what the situation calls for. And that's the mentality I believe Rudolph will play with.
All right. So better decisions with the football.
That's the hope. That's the goal. That's why I think they made the switch.
Do you think that that third down play of him not checking it down to Warren over there was the straw that broke the camel's back and not necessarily the 2 interceptions?
I think it's all together. I don't know if there's one singular play that says anything. I think it's probably just a combination of things stacking up over time.
All
right. Anything else from any other players? I don't know if anyone else spoke significantly. I mean, Pat Freiermuth, he did take the blame, by the way. Freiermuth did on that missed third down conversion over the middle that led to the Colts taking the lead into the half, which Mike Tomlin essentially referred to as a turning point of this game. So Freiermuth took the blame for that play, not Trubisky.
All right. I respect him for saying that.
Speaking of that game, Dave, going through the all-22 of this one since our last podcast, we'll start with the Steelers offense. What jumped out at you at the all-22?
The poor offensive line play, which I think we've already highlighted top to bottom. I mean, the run game was the most positive aspect of that, mostly interior on some pulling type stuff and some guys getting out. Once again, I think that, I don't know what did you go back and watch that holding call on Mason Cole on that run by Jaylen Warren? I thought that was ticky-tacky there, but I thought they did some good things internally with the offensive line in the run blocking category, because there were a couple of runs there that were able to hit. Obviously, the big thing is they weren't able to get any momentum and sustain, enough drives to feature the running game enough. But there were runs there. There were runs to be had there in the interior, but totality wise with that offensive line, especially in the pass blocking aspect of it, it was miserable.
You're right. The run blocking had a couple of moments. They ran a dart scheme with Dan Moore. Harris was behind for a good chunk of yardage. They had some kind of short pulls with hitting the 3-tech instead of kind of really pulling longer and around. They got some yardage, but I thought in some of the situational moments, the goal line, for example, they could not get a push up front. I thought they were really, not the physical unit. They didn't play with enough leverage and drive in some of those moments. And even on some split zone type runs, early down runs, they weren't getting that push up front. I did think, generally speaking, besides some of their gap runs, especially on zone runs, more straight up, duo man blocking, Pittsburgh's O-line did not get really the push they needed. Right. And the Colts D-line won the point of attack too routinely in this game. In pass protection, it was just an utter mess. Broderick Jones, his worst game of the season by far. couldn't handle cross chops. Chalk dropped his eyes, gave up the edge repeatedly. James Daniels picking up stunts. That was a big problem. Dan Moore getting walked back. I mean, it was a pretty bad across the board.
Yeah, and obviously too when you get as far down behind the on the scoreboard that they were, it really started to snowball from there.
Yeah. So anything else offensively? I think the pass game was as as hard to watch live as it was on the All-22.
Yeah, but there were still we saw them do some things with some square ends and some deep digs and hit one to Pickens and then came back and had an opportunity to hit another one to Pickens. I thought Deontay Johnson had a couple of nice separations on a couple of his plays on the outside there, but once again, all of it produced just one explosive play in the game. And then turning the football over 3 times, 2 of them on interceptions, and one of them on the Najee fumble was obviously very, very critical, and just things that we've talked about. If this team even turns the football over once, it seems like you can just mail it on in as a L right now, the way this offense is playing. So there were some limited and what if he. It's a big what if because he didn't. What if he did check down to Jaylen Warren on that one? How does the complexion of the game maybe change on that one play?
Well, Pittsburgh couldn't allow 13 straight runs on the other end of that thing for sure. But yeah, you never know. It's a 1-possession game. If you assume that Boswell makes it, it's 24-16 at that point. So you can never say for sure.
Right.
Defensively,
other than that, there's not a lot to talk about on offense that's positive.
Defensively, your thoughts?
I keep going back to those 13 consecutive runs. Man, they were whooped down at that point, and the further that you started to get behind on the scoreboard, on top of it, it allowed Gardner Minshew to get the ball out quickly and not really get himself in situations where he was putting them on danger, which kind of eliminates some things that the Steelers pride themselves on and trying to take that football away. There were some individual efforts, I think, going back through that I was impressed. I thought Marcus Golden, for the limited amount of snaps that he played, I think he played well in this game. Think you had a good clip of Trenton Thompson coming back into the game after suffering his injury and giving a lot of effort in there. I thought it was interesting to see Patrick Peterson maneuvering a lot in the center field situation there. They were just out schemed again, man. And it's not like the Colts did anything foreign that you didn't see on tape. We had mentioned kind of that rub route, the short yardage situation that they ran kind of early in the game to pick up, I think, a short third down. A lot of the things that they did weren't foreign. The Steelers just didn't have answers for them, especially down in the Steelers' own end of the field there, failing to pick up the crosser on those things. And I don't think the linebackers as a whole, the inside linebackers, played well at all. And they just got chewed up. What has happened a lot this year. They got chewed up down the middle, down the spine of the defense there. And they really had no answers for it.
Yeah, I think communication was a problem in this one, in part due to the injuries, I'm sure, but no excuses. They have to get the job done. I just, in the way that Pittsburgh's double teams did not get the push, the Colts double teams got a great push on, a lot of on Travis Adams, some Benton, a little bit of Hayward. Did you go back and watch Hayward specifically? I was trying to get a feel.
Yeah, him and Benton, and they got introduced to Quentin Nelson. Quentin Nelson and the center really communicated and played well together in kind of thwarting both those guys.
I thought maybe Hayward wasn't quite as bad on tape on the All-22 as I felt watching it live, but he still struggled and just looked tired and gassed at the end.
He can't run right now. There's times where it feels like he's kind of overcompensating for maybe how he's feeling with that groin or whatnot. And what ends up usually happening with that? You saw this with who who was the wide receiver?
The Jags receiver that got hurt.
Yeah.
Kirk, is that Christian Kirk?
No, the other one.
Ridley?
Zay.
Oh, Zay. Okay.
And they talked about that on the broadcast. When you have players trying to overcompensate, and then they just Zay, what was it? What did it end up being? A hamstring, I think, on him. You just worry about guys like that trying to overcompensate for a nagging thing, and it affecting something. It's painful to watch Cam run right now.
Yeah, I just saw him kind of wear down. I mean, on that 13 straight run drive, he was out there the first 9 plays, and he's trying to give it his all. Obviously, he was gassed by the end, and the body language just did not look good. He just looked defeated.
Right, and I just think overall that Colts line, especially on that third, they were bullying them. Mm-hmm. It became, this is what we're going to do, and we know you can't stop it type of football. And even so, doing it with look, I think I think depth at running back with pedigree guys is a bit oversold, because you see it around the league and all. So I'm, as long as you have the blocking up front, that the Colts have, you can have guys like Trey Sermons and the other kid, who is it, Goodson, right? Go off on you.
Sure. I thought Larry Ogunjobi had a pretty solid game. I was happy to see that, because I had written about that before the game, that he'd been pretty quiet the last 2 months or so. I thought he had, got the sack and had some good wins in the run game. Not enough overall to stop the run as a team, as a unit. But I did think Ogunjobi was a bright spot. That thought Joey Porter Jr. made some plays, had a really nice recovery and sink and break up on, I think that was Mo Alley Cox on not the touchdown, but the other end zone ball they threw that he broke up. So I thought there was some bright spots there.
Yeah, the linebacker plays, just inside linebacker plays, not up to snuff, and Atlanta Roberts has given his all in that. But Mark Robinson's had some struggles. Obviously, Walker's had some struggles, and they look in that 13, and not just really the 13 consecutive runs. That push was just nauseating to watch there. And the running backs always falling forward, whereas we talked about it on the other side. Man, it seemed like when the Steelers running backs were getting stuck, they're getting stuck right in a square part of the chest and going backwards. Mm-hmm. And you did not see that at all, really, in this game when it came to the Colts running game.
I agree. And then some zone beaters. Pittsburgh having to play a lot of zone in this one. I thought Minshew attacked that middle of the field well overall. So that's kind of my overall takeaways of this defense.
Right, I agree.
All right, Dave, anything else here to talk about, to recap that we missed?
A little bit about, I wrote about the Mitch Trubisky contract a couple of days ago, and there are a couple of different ways you can go with that. And the main thing I think a lot talking about that is the $1 million roster bonus in March that he has. That's kind of a trigger to kind of trigger a decision. It's not earth-shattering by any shape of imagination. Now, after writing that article and going over the potential dead money and what you would save after roster displacement, specifically, you're saving a little bit more than $2 million that way. I think it is kind of worth examining the fact that technically, if you were to move on from Mitch Trubisky before that March roster bonus is due, and knowing that Mason Rudolph is an unrestricted free agent after this year, we have seen this team in the past not put themselves in situations where they enter the draft with only one quarterback under contract, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. In 2022, obviously there was the Haskins.
Did they extend? They had extended Mason Rudolph like right before the draft or something, didn't they?
Yeah, I think. But who else was in that room at that point?
Because
Ben had retired. I mean, obviously there was, again, a tragic Haskins death, which is a unique situation.
Well, you had, I'm trying to remember the minutia of how they had. Well, they had Haskins under contract, didn't they, for that previous?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, and then obviously, he passed away.
Right.
So that was a unique situation. But I think going into the draft, it was just Mason Rudolph. Well, then Trubisky came in March. I'm not sure the timeline of everything. So I get your point, though. Obviously, this team does not go into drafts usually with a giant hole at a certain position.
What I'm getting at here is, could as an option, at least to get them into the summer. I don't want to totally rule out the possibility of them paying that $1 million roster bonus and then maybe making a decision with Mitch Trubisky later on in the summer, and then specifically after June 1st, where you could lessen the immediate dead money for 2023 and then put the other bit of it into 2025. You see what I'm saying like that?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it would require the commitment of $1 million roster bonus that you're not going to get back. But technically, that could be a way that they go that would enable Mitch to stay past the March roster. Obviously, if you're talking about a $3, $4, $5 million roster bonus, it's a lot different situation. But I don't want to totally rule out the option of them at least keeping the room with another guy in it with experience to make the decision later on in the summer. They could still move on from Mitch Trubisky very easily.
Mm-hmm.
And then in doing so, obviously, too, you probably would come out with a little bit better cap clearing situation by putting off that proration amount of 2025 until 2025 by a post June 1st roster cut. But I mean, I just wanted to throw out there that there is another option than direct cutting him. But I personally feel that we might see it go that way, and that's why I wrote about it. Just jettison him before you pay him the March roster bonus.
Yeah, I see that. And just quickly to go back, I think what happened in 22 was Ben retired, had Rudolph, he signed Trubisky in March, first day for agency, and then Haskins was killed in April. So you had Trubisky and Rudolph heading into the draft.
Right, and that's what I'm getting at it seems to be the general idea that they have, because I mean, quite honestly, that Mason Rudolph extension kind of came out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, that was a big surprise.
And they did that, I think, to give them, body security in the quarterback room there.
Could they, though, re-sign Mason Rudolph? Let's say he plays a solid game, or even if he's just at an average Mason Rudolph type of game, and let Trubisky go and make Rudolph the number 2. He was the number 2 for several seasons before Trubisky came in and Pickett got drafted. So they, at some point, they've been comfortable with him as a top backup.
Is that a possibility? Well, I think you would think that this is a one-game audition, right?
Yes.
All right. So let's say he goes out there and plays well. Or plays better than Mitch.
Okay.
Now you're not going to break the bank in any stretch of imagination, but could you at least give him a 2-year deal or something, and at least some sort of a minimal signing bonus that makes him jump to grab it?
Yeah, I mean, he's not, even if he has a decent game, he's going to be competing for a backup spot in free agency no matter where he goes. So it's not like he's going to get a chance to start somewhere. So if he could stay in Pittsburgh and kind of have some sort of assurance he's the number 2, and then you probably draft somebody or undrafted free agent, something like that, that's one way to go about it.
I mean, this we're talking about a contract that's really, really minimal in value, and really the only caveat to him signing it is the instant guaranteed money of a very small signing bonus.
For Rudolph?
Right.
Yeah, but also just, okay, he's the number 2. He knows where he's at, and there's just finality for him in terms of what his future looks like.
But it would have to be a cheap enough of a deal that is, should something else come along, you could still carry him as a number 3.
Sure, yeah, it's not going to be a large contract. I mean, even if he has a decent game, he's playing on the minimum this year. He had basically no free agency interest and no real value out there, so it's not going to change his perception dramatically, I wouldn't think.
but you would probably do something with him prior to making a decision with Trubisky and that roster bonus in March, right?
Sure. You don't want to decline Trubisky's option and then not get a deal done with Rudolph and kind of lose both ends. So yeah, it would get done before then.
All right. But I just wanted to throw that out there about the, because the roster bonus is only $1 million, that there is another option that still could result in Mitch Trubisky not being on the 2024 53-man roster. But what it does is it just delays your decision of making sure you can keep that room with another body in it.
The question is, though, if you're still planning on cutting him at some point, how do you eventually replace him at some point going into your season? Who's your backup quarterback?
Right. Do you do something with the draft? Is there another cheaper option that you sign, and do you let him compete and get through training? Right. That kind of thing. So obviously, other things would likely happen at the quarterback position, whatever they might be. But sure. At least it gets you through the summer with another experienced body in the room.
Gotcha. All right, Dave, anything else? Or do you want to get to some reader emails and close out today's show?
I guess we can get to some emails here. Let me sort them out real quick.
And then be back on Friday to recap and preview of the Bengals game. Hopefully have a beat writer on to talk Cincinnati and go from there.
Let's start with Danielle. Writes in, good day. This is obviously from Brisbane, Australia, our buddy over there. As we approach the Christmas season, I just want to thank you for all your hard work over 2023. The podcast really helped me get through a tough year. You briefly discussed a recent draft. Recently discussed the draft classes of the Steelers, and it got me thinking. I rate the performance of this year's class compared to their draft positions as follows. He's got Broderick Jones at expected level, Joey Porter Jr. above expectations, Keanu Benton above expectations, Darnell Washington below expectations, Nick Herbig above expectations, and Corey Trice and Spencer Anderson unable to assess. Overall, it seems like it's shaping up to be a good class. He says he did the same with the 2022 class. He's got Kenny Pickett below expectations, George Pickens recently below expectations, DeMarvin Leal below expectations, Calvin Austin III below expectations, Connor Hayward above expectations, Mark Robinson at expectations. Some minimal value is okay for a 7th round pick, he has in parentheses, and Chris Oladokun below expectations. He says, overall, my takeaway from this exercise is that it is the 2022 class which is really letting the Steelers down now. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. It's really hard to argue, Dan, the way you kind of got this laid out. I think Broderick Jones is kind of at expected level. Joey Porter Jr. maybe a tick above expectations. Keanu Benton obviously above expectations. Darnell Washington, that's below expectations so far, right? Now, how much of it is his fault? I thought the blocking would be better with Darnell. I mean, we've seen glimpses of what we thought it would be, but just in totality, probably not where I thought it would be. Nick Herbig, obviously above expectations, although he's not playing a lot overall. And you obviously can't assess Corey Trice or Spencer Anderson. It's not their faults there. I think top to bottom, this draft class has been fine, right?
The 2023 class?
Yeah, this year's class.
Yeah, I've been really happy with it. I think there's a lot of, not just only good play now, but encouraging results for what they can be and hopefully will be on that second year jump. And so getting a lot of playing time, these guys have played a ton of snaps. It's going to help them develop and be better next year. So yeah, I'm really happy with the 2023 class.
All right, and his thoughts on the 22 class is basically, which is really letting the Steelers down right now.
It is, yeah. I think that's your top 3 picks. Kenny Pickett, George Pickens, DeMarvin Leal, none of the 3 are producing the way that you hope that they would in their second NFL seasons.
They got to figure out a way to start using Calvin Austin some.
But again, what is his skill set outside of his speed?
Right.
He's fast.
But you got to find a way to integrate him in and not with the screaming red light on his helmet either, that when he comes into onto the field that he's going to get the football, You're going to have to get creative, a little bit more creative with him and get the ball to him out in space A lot more than you're doing now, and even double isn't much.
Right. Well, can you double zero? I mean, I get it. I don't know. I'm kind of seeing him as a speed guy with a small catch radius, not as much twitch as you would hope for a guy of his frame and kind of skill set, and a guy that goes down on contact super easily. And I just don't know how to integrate that in my system.
And if you're a fan, you really got to worry about what's going on with DeMarvin Leal right now.
Yeah, the pass rush aspect has not been there. He's a reserve-based defensive end, and that's been disappointing.
Jeff Kinney writes in, yikes. How do you think the other guys on the team feel about George Pickens not wanting to get hurt while blocking? Every other player on offense has got to be shaking their head about how selfish and obvious and oblivious this attitude is. Does he not realize that football is a team game? Yeah, we're not going to rehash all that. Jeff, we talked about him probably way too long than a lot of people wanted us to talk about earlier in the show, but point taken is all I can say, Jeff. It would be interesting to get inside the heads of some other people in that locker room right now.
Yeah, I'm sure they didn't love the comments and what the tape showed. Just two other quick aside points. According to Jordan Schultz, a Bleacher Report, Jamar Chase will not play this weekend. Not been officially confirmed by the team, but just more confirmation that Chase probably not going to go. And just a complete sidebar, rip to the Pittsburgh Maulers, officially folding as the USFL XFL merger. The Maulers not part of that group. And so the Maulers, if you're the diehard fan, they are no more.
That's sad. All right. Chuck Griffith writes in, Dave, same question as last year. Where do the Steelers go with the offensive line and free agency in the draft, realizing that the O-line has played better as of late? Not true in 2023. Will Pat Myers return? He's got parentheses hoping for a change. And which lineman would you write in pen and which in pencil for 2024? Obviously, yeah, that's we'll be talking about a lot of that stuff after the season goes. I think that I think it's time to find a new offensive line coach personally. I think it's time to make a change there. Look, Chikwama Okorafor is probably not going to be in that room come March. So that's one of your guys on that offensive line on the 53 that's probably not going to be there. I would think that Sayamalu and Herbig will both carry over into next year. Obviously, Broderick Jones will carry over into next year. They need to do something else at center that either draft or the free agency route. You probably need to address the tackle position. Either draft or free agents. No, probably about it. You need to do that. You need to figure out where Spencer Anderson figures all into this. Maybe that's a guy that you can count on for depth only moving forward. They've had Dylan Cook on this roster all season, so there's obviously something there, probably only as a backup though. Long story short, a lot of this is going to carry over into 2024, minus probably Mason Cole and Chikwama Okorafor and maybe one other of the depth guys.
Yeah, just kind of big picture in terms of starters next year, the guys that should remain the same. I see it as three people: Isaac Sayamalu at left guard, James Daniels at right guard, and Broderick Jones at one of the tackle spots. We'd probably prefer left tackle over right tackle, put him back in his natural spot, but we'll see exactly what the team decides there. Other guys will come back, like Nate Herbig, Spencer Anderson. I assume Dan Moore will be part of the roster. His role unclear right now, but in terms of starters, I think those are your three, and you work from there.
But they're going to have to address at least two positions in either the draft or free agency, right? Tackle and center.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. I mean, you got your three guys, say Malu, Daniels at guard, Jones at one of the tackle spots. That leaves you with a center and tackle spot to really examine, to look to upgrade this offseason.
All right, Chuck, hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit. And once again, we'll be talking a lot more about this after the season and all like that. Todd Gensler writes in, team dynamics. Hey, fellas, do you ever recall a team like this year that became so unlikable in all my years of following the Steelers. Never once did I ever have angst for any of the players until now. Several are my first, won't play or fight for each other, aren't accountable, make excuses, and simply are hard to like, he says. Is it culture, coaching, professional sports as we know it, and will it just get worse? I don't think that it's. Look, you don't like to see what's happened, recently with George Pickens, and obviously that's going to get all the focus and attention. I wouldn't say that this team that there's players that are unlikable really as a whole.
I don't think fans really like George Pickens too much right now.
Yeah, but I mean, he says, I don't ever recall a team this year that became so unlikable. I don't think you can rubber stamp George Pickens for the entire team.
No, I don't know what he was referring to beyond that. And I'm not saying I dislike George Pickens, but I think there's obviously people aren't liking the comments that he has to say, and there's kind of been a turning against him publicly. I don't know. I mean, whenever you lose, everything kind of gets worse. And if they were winning, you'd probably like all these guys. So that's kind of what it boils down to, I think, often. But yeah, it's been just a really messy year where it feels like the team is not a team. And I don't know the last time I could say that about the group.
Is culture a real thing in the NFL right now?
It's a real thing. Absolutely. Now,
I mean, what I mean is how can you quantify that better?
I mean, you really can't quantify it. And you're right. We're outsiders trying to peer in and examine culture, and that's tough to do. But we've followed this team, and fans have followed this team long enough to get a feel for how a locker room is working or not working. And this year feels different than others.
Okay. Here's a better question here. How does a culture deteriorate with the same essential coaching staff and several same leaders technically over a span post Ben Roethlisberger? How does that deteriorate? Or was it even to the level that many maybe thought it was? See what I'm saying?
Kind of. I think they've lacked the offensive leadership as that old guard left, Ben, Pouncey, DeCastro, etc. And they've not really been able to fill that well. And then you compound just the losing aspect of it this year, and everything kind of gets magnified.
I mean, without a doubt, when you had the Goon Squad there, I mean, you had a culture, right?
Yeah,
of course,
no doubt.
Ben was there and yada yada. But I mean, in a word, the culture has deteriorated.
It feels like it based on the evidence.
All right. And the coaching? Because you got a question mark next to that.
In terms of their performance and doing their job and their competency?
He's asking a broad-based question based on saying that this team became so unlikable. Is it culture, coaching, professional sports as we know it, and will it just get worse?
Yeah, it's probably all the above. I mean, it's hard to say for sure, but I think there's a lot of factors that go into, your culture and how your team is built. And again, if you coach well and you have talented players, then you win, and the culture is going to always seem good whenever you're winning. So there's an element of just the results-based nature of the business of the sports world that kind of dictates how a team looks and feels.
All right. Brian Tellini writes in, good morning, Dave and AK. Disclaimer, if someone would have asked a question like this 3 weeks ago, I would have rolled my eyes. Today, it feels relevant. Let's just say the season ends on the same trajectory that it is currently on. The team is a mess. We are playing ugly, undisciplined, uninspired football, finishing with a record of, say, 7-10 or 8-9. Is there any move you don't consider? Is there any rock you don't turn over? Another disclaimer, I'm not saying that we should trade TJ Watt. He says in 2018, the Bears traded multiple first-round picks to the Raiders for Khalil Mack. If the return was similar, should the Steelers be inclined to listen? He says, we are a team, as Alex recently pointed out, with no identity. That's the biggest thing to me is not so much the culture aspect as it is the identity of this team.
Well, they can be part and parcel. They can be one and the same. Your identity hopefully creates your culture. Or culture hopefully creates your identity. But I think from a culture is more of the less of the on-field thing. It's more of the off-field thing. Identity can also be the on-field thing of this is how we win. This is our mode of operation. And Pittsburgh is very much there's no clear path right now.
Team with more questions than answers, a team that hasn't experienced real success in more than a decade. Half measures are not going to move the needle enough. This team needs to start flipping stones no matter how heavy they might be. Is there any player in this organization that should be considered untouchable? Is there any coach whose job should be considered safe? I mean, it really broadens out there the way he asked this question. Look, I mean, the conversation is about Mike Tomlin and the rest of the coaches and their job security and whether or not they go are going to be asked, unless this team wins a playoff game, period.
Sure. I think everything gets examined. Does everything get changed? No, not necessarily. Was he floating a TJ Watt type of trade there with the Khalil Mack comparison?
I guess that's what he's getting at here. The meat of this question that I think really he wants answered is there anybody that should be considered safe? Man, it would take a lot for me to trade a TJ Watt. It would, and maybe that's the fan aspect of me coming out there. I like TJ Watt being part of this team. Yeah. I like Minkah Fitzpatrick being part of this team. I like, even though it's winding down, I like Cam Hayward being part of this team. Now beyond that,
yeah, it's on the table. Yeah, I mean, like I said, what you have to do when the season ends is go down through the roster name by name and just examine them. And some of them are going to be very quick conversations. TJ Watt, awesome player, great teammate, staying, no question about it. Same with Minkah, same with Cam, etc. But you're gonna have some harder conversations about some other names on this roster. So it all gets examined. It does not mean it all has to be changed, though.
Does every player have a price? Or are there some that you just don't, that are untouchable?
I mean, I guess everything has a price, but sometimes that price is so incredibly high that no team is ever going to reach it.
Right.
And TJ Watt is one of those players.
Look, long story short, Brian, this team's got a lot of evaluation to do, starting with Art Rooney up top and filtering down from there. Especially if this team doesn't find a way to get into the playoffs somehow and win a playoff game. Because let's face it, even if they get into the playoffs right now, if they don't win a playoff game, it's still what way we termed this thing at the start of the season, right? It's going to be a disappointment if this team does not win at least a playoff game.
Yeah, that streak has to end. That streak will continue. No playoff win since 2016. And each year that passes by, as that extends, it becomes harder and harder to ignore that fact.
Look, I personally came into this season thinking that maybe this team could get to the playoffs and win a playoff game. And then that Super Bowl, then us talk maybe going into next season thinking, all right, the window's open. Man, these last several weeks make me wonder how far that window is away now.
It's away, and the problem is, what is your path to win in the playoffs next year? What is the path to figure this out and make this work? I don't know what it looks like. Last year you sat there and said, well, you had young offense. You finished the year on a great note. We'll just kind of get the offense to regroup and develop and take that next step. Defense comes back. They do their thing. Healthy TJ Watt. Okay, that's your path. You can buy that. That's fine. This year, what does it look like? I don't know.
And look, you see teams around the league make drastic changes in 1 year and get themselves in the playoffs, right? I mean, it's not like, but when you look overall to it, the players under contract that this team has right now, there's a core of these guys that aren't going anywhere.
Right.
But that you're going to have to roll it back with. But on the flip side, you got to have the Chukwuma Okorafor gone. I don't think anything's going to happen with A or B, Deontay or George Pickens, but I don't think you could potentially rule it out right now. Mason Cole probably going to be gone. Mitch Trubisky's one of the higher cap charges on this team for 2024. They've got a long list of unrestricted free agents, and most of those guys aren't going to be back, nor do you really want them back. You start looking at the product from this year, from where this team sits now, and looking ahead to what the holes on this roster look like now, next season, and then start factoring in X amount of draft picks and how unless something changes the normal path of free agency, doesn't feel like it's going to get it done.
Right. I mean, you can tweak the edges and replace some of the free agents that, aren't costing you a lot and aren't playing major roles. But what are some of the bigger changes that may have to be made? And then also, culturally, if you believe there's a culture issue, how do you get your culture back in one off season? That's a difficult and messy question.
I'm not so back to the culture thing. I'm not suggesting that doesn't exist, but I think it's hard to rubber stamp Steelers culture from the 70s into today's game.
It doesn't have to be from the 70s. It just has to be from 3 years ago. I mean, just in terms of playing as a team and doing the little things and being detail oriented and staying together. I mean, those things are very real, and the good teams and the successful teams are able to pull that off.
All right. And if you believe that Mike Tomlin cannot recapture that culture, is that a conversation? Is that where it starts during the offseason? Can we recapture this culture?
It's certainly one half of it. One half is getting the talented players that are going to help you win from an on-field perspective, but also there's a cohesion culture aspect that has to be looked at.
Just looking at this at a glance real quick, if a team came calling to you during the offseason and wanted to give you a third-round draft pick for Najee Harris, would you take it?
Off the top, I don't really know for sure if I would or not. I think he probably would. I don't know where I sit right now.
I'm just trying to think of, based on people saying who's untouchable and all like that. I mean, he's not an untouchable guy, basically, right?
No, I wouldn't call him untouchable, but I don't know what the price would be. It depends on what free agency might be, what the draft class might look like. I mean, there's a lot of factors that have to be considered.
Man, when you start rolling through the guys under contract next year, and the guys that that probably that are under contract that won't be soon, this team's going to have a lot of holes, man.
But in some ways, that's probably a good thing. You probably need to, reset this thing again.
All right, let me see if I can fit one more question in here real quick. My mind's racing right now. Let's hit this one from Bryce real quick. I'm only going to get part of it here because his are very long. This is more of a thought, but Alex, that video Pat Freiermuth blocking the end makes me want to vomit. Watching the Steelers continually ask this tight end group to base block 3 and 4 techs is infuriating. Washington has had good moments, but he's still a rookie who needs to get stronger. I don't think it's so much the strength with Washington as it is with technique, because we've seen him put some good moments on tape. He says, and Freiermuth just can't do it. In my opinion, the lack of adjusting the usage of the tight ends is one of the biggest gaffes of the season for the coaching staff. I mean, Alex has already kind of said that. Why are you putting some of these guys in some of the positions that you're putting them in? And all due respect to Connor Hayward, who's a 110% effort guy, there's just some situations you cannot put him in. And it's not his fault.
And I think generally that they've done a good job avoiding the situations he can't be in. Some miscues and mistakes. And it was just one play with Freiermuth, but you just kind of look at the bigger picture and say, do you understand your personnel when you see stuff like that?
And Pat Freiermuth is never going to be that guy at the end of the line of scrimmage. He's just not.
No, he's not.
So you've got to hope that Washington does become that, but the only way you're going to get Washington on the field is either you're going to take Pat Freiermuth off in 11 personnel type situations, or you're going to roll 2 tight ends out there. That's the only way you can do it.
Yeah. I mean, right now this team only has 2 wide receivers though. So you could theoretically play a lot of 12 personnel.
Right. And maybe that's what they need to do a lot more of against Cincinnati. Yeah.
I think Freiermuth should be like a stand up, slot option, not a slot, necessarily a true slot receiver, but, not an inline guy. Get him, backside nub, standing up in the slot. Washington, you're inline Y. That's how you best utilize those skill sets.
What are your expectations? There are no expectations for Saturday right now, right?
No, I don't have any right now. Nope.
All right, we'll break it down further when we get into that game when we get to the Friday podcast. All right, any closing thoughts here? Did we depress the hell out of everybody today?
I think we did a pretty good job for ourselves.
Humbug! Merry Christmas, Tiny Tim.
All right, we'll be back Friday.
Tiny Alex.
Tiny Alex with some Christmas holiday cheer.
All right, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button. Once again, we'll be back on Friday getting everybody ready for the Saturday game at Acrisure Stadium between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Bengals. So until then, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.